Today's Trade Blast is what we're calling our Kobe Bryant edition. I was in Los Angeles and I ran into some entrepreneurs that were selling the Kobe Bryant edition t-shirts, so I decided to wear that for this show. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. As a Patreon supporter, we greatly appreciate your support and subscription, and we look forward to providing you useful information for trading and all your other activities. So today's Trade Blast is focused on the fact that I believe, entered something I call the zone. And what that means is that between now and when earnings is announced, we're in a completely different space for what Tesla tends to do, because we have a lot of sort of interesting points moving that could potentially influence what's happening with the stock. So in particular today, my Trade Blast is kind of unusual because I have a group of folks that are kind of trading buddies, and everyone sort of throws their attitudes into the pot, and we sort of see what everybody's thinking, why, and how might that play out in the markets the next day. So last night was an interesting discussion because I have some calls. I also have some sort of hedging puts in my account, and I thought it was interesting because the two best traders I had a chance to talk with to get a feel for how they saw today breaking out. So in both cases, the conclusion was that Tesla stock price is going to be down, and it could be down significantly. And they have put positions that are large in anticipation of that. The biggest part of that is just the fact that if you go backwards over the last couple of months, Wednesday tends to be a down day, while Monday and Tuesday tend to be up days. So the logic is that you just have to figure out which side it's going on and collect some of the 50 points that Tesla will move, and you can make a lot of money. So that's sort of the general logic that's being operated under. I would say that based on what's been happening in the past, as well as the fact that the stock has had a nice run, there are all these variables that suggest Tesla should have a pretty down day today. And when it does move down, as we've discussed, it tends to move down significantly enough for you to make some nice money when it comes to the puts. So that's pretty much the argument from one side. And then there are a number of technicals that were used to validate that point. So the answer is that I think that the logic I've heard makes sense, and if that's the direction things are going, one definitely has to keep that in mind. Another thing that's happening right now that was discussed is the pinning process. So what we have happening right now is that instead of Friday being, so if you look at your options, expiration actually is on the 9th this week, which is Thursday, because Good Friday there's no trading. So basically Wednesday this week, which is today, turns into Thursday, and Thursday turns into Friday. And we all know about the pinning process that can occur on Fridays that could really shape the day based on professional traders sort of controlling what they want to have happen with the stock. Another data point that was raised is that if you look at the put-call ratio, there's something like 7,000 calls and maybe 2,000 puts. So keeping it below 550 is actually in the best interest of the market makers, and there are huge dollars that come with them doing that. So as we head into the pinning process, this is definitely something to be considered. The next thing that comes up is that, so that's the general discussion of what's going on, general points made. I didn't include the sort of graphs that were developed by some of the technical traders among the group, and we'll start doing that, particularly if you send me a note and say, hey, I want to see the technical graphs along with the general conversation of what's going on. I can figure out how to get those together and ship them off to you. I actually have it in email, so for those of you who send me a note, I do have an email to send you that sort of captures some of the technical charts and data that folks are working with to evaluate what to happen next. So this is when we come to sort of an interesting bifurcation of attitude. So one of the problems in trading is how you develop all this data and you know that it fits, but then there are other variables that play in. So one example that comes, that's pretty obvious for me is the fact that if you look at, like, there's this 10-day moving average, and everyone is like, okay, look at the 10-day average and how that affects what's happening, and I think it's totally valid. The problem that I see going on right now with the analysis is the fact that Thursday's announcement of numbers sort of changes the conversation dramatically from the prior, periods of time all the way back to January 3rd, when we had a set of numbers and you could look at afterwards what tends to happen to the stock. So as we've discussed numerous times, we think there's a 3-day rule where all of a sudden the analysts have a chance to take in and digest the numbers that Tesla has put out, use those numbers to start developing forecasts of what to expect from the company, and then they hand those to the institutional investors who have to invest large amounts of money, and they leverage that to make buying or selling decisions on that stock. In this case, it's Tesla, and we think they're actually, the institutions have begun buying, anticipating a strong year for the company to continue. So Jeffries came strong first, and that helped the stock push up nicely. There's some analysis right now that's saying, hey, stock gets to 560, then it sort of pulls back. The question mark is, can it break out of that 560 heading for 600, given that it's gotten some upgrades as well as positive response from analysts? And so we're going to find out what happens with that today. In the early going, Tesla was up as much as $11. And I think that's because maybe for the first time in a long time, Seeking Alpha actually came out with some positive comments from one of their analysts about Tesla's potential short and long term. And so we think this is good news, and it seems to be reflected in the stock. It's also interesting to note that one of the variables that sort of affects how the analysis comes together is what is the general market doing, and can Tesla sort of separate itself from that, good or bad? This morning, what we've noticed is that the number of dollars that Tesla is up pre-market seems to be vacillating according to whether or not the NASDAQ, S&P, and Dow are up or down. And so that whole situation seems to be waiting for which direction things are going to go, driven by news on the virus or other things that could affect kind of what's occurring. So so in general, that's what's occurring. Most of the folks are real put-oriented, think that Tesla's going to fall today to be consistent with other Wednesdays, where it usually is up Mondays and Tuesdays and then tends to drop on Wednesday, and we'll see how that plays out. I have to admit that my analysis of things is on the upside. The main reason being we've got 2 upgrades already. The target is somewhere in that 650, maybe more zone for the stock. And I have to admit, I've been really stuck in, well, what's happening right now? When will the plant reopen? How will those numbers affect the next quarter? I'm sort of laser focused on Tesla's ability in Q2 to deliver the numbers necessary to join the S&P. And so all of my thinking is sort of focused on this one issue. I have to say that, the answer might be China, in that if that plant gets going fast enough, Tesla can make its annualized numbers in the 500K range easily. But there are all these questions of supply chain batteries and all these other things that go with getting that done, which is why I believe that the plant is getting so large in Shanghai to allow them to not have any, to have the ability to eliminate supply chain issues by bringing stuff in-house or bringing suppliers very close as needed. So we'll see how all this plays out. So in general, for our trade blast today, the crew is fairly negative. I have to admit, I kind of disagree. I'm fairly positive. And the main reason is that we've got numbers to work off of that you can bake into a spreadsheet. The analysts have done that. The reason the stock is up where it is now is driven by those numbers. And we now have institutions that have a green light to go ahead and start purchasing the stock. So I think that triple combo is what gives us a nice little updraft if the market cooperates. The answer is what we're going to see. And for now, it seems to have been a Mexican standoff where it's going sort of nowhere fast, but we'll look forward to what happens. And frankly, I don't mind being wrong. I mean, I like to be right, or bend what I'm thinking to sort of fit what everybody else is thinking, but it's not my style. I like to figure out my own data and then go for that data to determine, how to look at things and how to implement. So kind of that's our trade blast for today. We want to thank you. Kobe wants to thank you for taking time out to join us. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, macht's gut overall. Hitrot, Choda Hafez. And in Jamaica, we say enough respect, walk good man. Thanks for joining us and have a wonderful day. And bye for now.